Hello everyone, I'm Az. Welcome to my channel. Hope everybody's doing well. Today I want to have a look at the Dangerous album and era from Michael Jackson. So in 1990, things had been quiet for Michael Jackson. He'd had his bad era, obviously, and he finished that tour in January of 1989 in LA. And then things had gone quiet for a few years, and Janet was out on tour. But in 1990, The Simpsons was absolutely massive. It must have been around for 2 or 3 years by that point, and it was the biggest thing on TV. It was definitely the biggest show on TV at the time. But in 1990, this was released. So this is a single from the album The Simpsons Sing the Blues, and this was the lead single from that album, and this is Do the Birdman, and this was number one in the UK and some other territories, but it was absolutely massive, and it had a real sort of Michael Jackson vibe to it. So I absolutely loved this track at the time as well. I was a huge Simpsons fan, as most kids were. I was, what, 11? So there was something really sort of Michael Jackson-esque about this single and this song. And later it transpired that Michael did actually perform the backing vocals on it, and he co-produced this song with a guy called Brian Lauren, who passed away recently, only a few weeks ago. I think he was quite young as well, Brian Lauren. He was early 50s. 59. Brian Lauren passed away. He was 59. So this single was massive, and I absolutely loved it. It had a real sort of melodic, catchy, hooky sort of feel to it. And of course, being that Michael Jackson sang the backing vocals sort of lifted it to another level and gave it that real sort of MJ vibe and that MJ feel to it. So that was a whole year before the Dangerous album. So in November of 1990, and then in November of 1991, this was released. So this was the debut single from Michael's new album, and this, of course, is Black or White, and this was phenomenal. This was phenomenal. Now, in this video, I want to sort of talk about the campaign of the singles released from the album. And I also sort of want to mix that up with just talking about the joys of owning physical media. Back in the 80s and 90s, owning physical media was an absolute necessity. You had to own the physical media if you wanted to be part, or at least if you wanted to feel you were part of something tangible. So, it was an absolute necessity to sort of buy singles and albums. Now, back at that time, I was still only 12 when this was released. So I was still relatively young and didn't, wasn't working at that point, obviously. So I didn't particularly have money to go out and buy things like singles. But for Christmas of that year, so this was released in mid-November. Was it mid-November? I think it was in mid-November. And then 2 weeks later, towards the end of November, this was released. And I received this for Christmas of 1991. And I mean, just like to receive that, to get up on Christmas morning, to go downstairs to the living room and to find this under the Christmas tree there was nothing like it. There was nothing like the feeling of just owning the physical product, the physical format. And this was phenomenal. And up until this point as well, Michael's prior albums that I have on cassette, Bad, Thriller, and Off the Wall, had very minimal sort of inlays to their cassette tapes and to their vinyls as well. But this was incredible to get this. This was the first of its kind that Michael released. And I mean, it doesn't feature the song lyrics. It features the sort of the credits of who worked on it and sort of the production credits, if you want to call it that. But it did come with two sort of poems, The Dance here. And then on the reverse here, you have Planet Earth, which would also feature 2 years later in Michael's second book, Dancing the Dream. So just really nice to have a physical product and to feel part of something. There was an interaction to having physical product that just doesn't seem to exist in this day and age. obviously you can buy physical albums and releases in this day and age, but it was different back then because you had to go to the music store to buy your albums. Obviously, I was gifted this on Christmas, but this was the era in which I sort of could fully immerse myself. Now, in during the bad era, I was fully immersed, absolutely. But I was a little bit older for Dangerous, so I was a little bit more tuned into what was sort of going on. And I won't say streetwise because I was still a child, but I was still a kid. But I was just sort of I really felt a part of this era. So this was the debut, and this was one of the last seismic events for music video releases. This was the short film for this was an event on the TV, and we all sat around the TV and waited for this to come on. I think maybe The Simpsons was on first, and The Simpsons had a break in the middle for this to debut, the short film for Black or White. And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. Michael looked incredible. The video visually was stunning. It featured Macaulay Culkin. It featured the guy from Cheers, Norm. I can't remember the actor's name, the guy who played Norm in Cheers. And then at the end of it as well, it featured The Simpsons. So this music video, this short film tied all of the things in 1991 that were absolutely massive in popular culture. So that was Michael Jackson, Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone, and The Simpsons. So you had three absolute juggernauts tied into one short film. And then, of course, there was the visual effects towards the end of the short film of the different characters changing into different faces and different ethnicities and different cultures, which the effects for that were pioneering at the time, and it was really exciting to see that. So, and then of course as well, you had Michael's Panther dance, which would be sort of edited out from various channels later on due to sort of some sort of controversy. I think that dance became something quite political and took on a sort of meaning after the event. But I mean, this song Black or White is just one of Michael's all-time greatest singles. It's catchy, it's got a great hook to it, it's got a little rap in the middle, it's got warm acoustic guitar to give it that sort of lovely visceral warm pop sound. And then as well it featured Slash on electric guitar. Now Slash didn't play the riff, the continued riff on the track. That was, I think it might have been Bill Bottrell, actually, the guy who produced this track. And I think Bill Bottrell also was responsible for playing those warm acoustic guitars to give the song that warm, vibrant sound. But this was phenomenal. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine a few years ago, and he said that he felt that Black or White was Michael Jackson's last great pop single. And although I don't particularly agree with him, I kind of know where he was coming from. It was certainly maybe the second to last event where Michael's unveiling of his short film was just such a global event. So that was Black or White. And as I said then, so Christmas then, the following month for December, I got this on Christmas Day. Now, 2 years later, I would have been 14 and I was in town in Cork City, where I'm from, and up on Washington Street there was a record shop called Smelly's. I don't know if Smelly's record shop is still around, but one day I found myself up there and I ventured into Smelly's record shop and I came across a whole batch of 7-inch singles from the Dangerous era. So this was incredibly exciting to come across an entire batch of 7-inch singles. And again, I suppose that gets back to my sort of love for physicality and owning the physical product. Again, I just felt like I was a part of something. So I expressed interest in these 7-inch singles, and I think he gave them for me at a cut price, but I didn't have enough money on me. So I had to catch the bus home with my friend and then scramble some money together one way or another, get the last bus back into town and just before Smelly's record shop closed up for the evening, I was able to sort of get these batch of 7 inch, these 7 inch singles. And I mean, it was an interaction. It was an expression of my fandom, and it was a physical act that just made the era all the more memorable and real, and you just really felt a part of something. So I was on cloud nine on the bus home with this batch of 7 inch singles. In fact, I've got this twice on 7 inch singles. So when I met my wife, who's also a Michael Jackson fan, she had her own separate Michael collection and I had my collection. So then we put the two collections together, and that's since sort of become my collection. I've inherited it. My wife is obviously still a massive Michael fan, but I suppose I'm more the fan of the physical media and the collecting. So I do have two copies of this, and I have a lot of duplicates in my collection of various different things, magazines, CDs, and yeah, a few different bits. So I might actually go through my collection at some point and put a separate batch of duplicates together and maybe do a giveaway at some point. I think that might be a nice thing to do, and it may help grow my channel as well. So that was Black or White. I digress. So then the next single after Christmas and the release of Black or White and the Dangerous album, we move into January of 1992. And in January 1992, Michael released this single, Remember the Time. Remember the Time. Now, this single is one of Michael's greatest singles of all time. It is one of Michael's greatest singular tracks of all time. It is melodic, catchy, hooky. The vocal performance and the music video is stunning, absolutely stunning. So I did manage to fetch this on tape cassette for a couple of pounds at the time. Now I can't specifically remember where I bought it, but I bought it for the simple reason that this contains Come Together. So this was the first physical release that we were able to get Come Together on. It hadn't been released physically up until that point. It featured on Moonwalker in 1989, and obviously the clip of Michael performing that on Moonwalker is phenomenal. And it was quite exciting to get this on single, as they were called back in the day, and to have Come Together was huge for me. It was massive, and that was another thing about those times as well, was that one additional song felt like you were getting a lot. It felt like you were getting a lot. Whereas today, everything is so sort of disposable and generic and passe. Back in those days, you got an extra Michael Jackson track. It was really, really a big deal. So that actually sort of, this reminds me of when I heard Leave Me Alone on CD for the first time back in the bad era. To receive this to be able to get this during the Dangerous era and to get the additional track was phenomenal. And part of that purchase from Smelly's record shop in Cork City was I was able to get Remember the Time as well on 7 inch single. And I mean, it's just beautiful to have that, to have the physical art. And there's something beautiful about physical things. There's a beauty to it. And just to be able to take this home, to be able to open it up, take out the vinyl, and then to sort of smell the vinyl, it just made everything so real, so real. And then of course thinking back on that time, and anytime I play the Dangerous album or hear any of the songs, all of those special memories are tied into that era and to buying the different formats. So that's really nice. That's really nice to have. So then in April of 1992, Michael released the third single from the Dangerous album, and that was In the Closet. Now, In the Closet was quite a shock when I saw the music video. The music video was directed by a guy called Herb Ritts. Herb Ritts had also directed music videos for Madonna and for Janet Jackson. I think the video for Madonna was Cherish, and the video for Janet Jackson was Love Will Never Do Without You, I think. So Herb Ritts style of videos were tended to be black and white and really sort of stylish and sophisticated. So this was the first music video of its kind that really brought out Michael Jackson's sexuality and sensual side to an extent that hadn't been seen before. He did the same thing for Janet Jackson with her video. And he brought out a sensuality to Janet Jackson that, although it was there, it wasn't to that level up until that point. So he did the same thing. And then the music video as well featured Naomi Campbell, and Michael is sort of thrusting against Naomi Campbell, and it gets very hot and steamy. And the track is incredible. The track is incredible. The track is one of the new Jack Swing tracks from the album. And I think those first those first three singles, I think, is arguably Michael's greatest run of successive singles. Black or White, Remember the Time, and In the Closet. I just think it's a phenomenal run. Now, you could argue the same thing with the Bad Era, but to have those three. So In the Closet, I think, fared okay on the charts. Remember the Time hit number one in most of the major territories, as did Black or White. Black or White was universally appraised and received, universally beloved by most people, and it hit number one in most of the major territories around the world. But I think this sort of hit sort of mid levels. This was probably a top five, but that succession of singles was phenomenal. Was phenomenal. Now later on, at some point, then I managed to pick up the maxi single of In the Closet, and the reason I picked up the maxi single of In the Closet was because it featured a track called The Promise, or a mix called The Promise. I really need to oil my chair. It's really distracting. So this featured The Promise, which is what initially made me seek this single out and buy it. And it turns out that The Promise really is no more than an extended house mix of In the Closet. It's okay, but it's not something I would return to regularly. But it's nice to have it. It's nice to have it. And again, it's just another memory that ties in with the era. So really nice to have it. Now, during this time as well, Michael was out on his Dangerous World Tour, and Pepsi was sponsoring Michael on his world tour, as they had on his previous world tour, Bad. And Michael, in conjunction with Pepsi, released this single. Now, I think this was a fan club release, and I wasn't aware of this song at the time. And it was only years later that I became aware of this. And with the advent of the internet and being on fan forums, I became aware of this. But my wife actually was gifted this from another Michael Jackson fan in work. There was a customer that used to frequent the shop where my wife worked, and he came in and he gifted her this. So again, I sort of inherited this through my wife. So I'm really delighted to have that. Now, this was also released subsequently on the Ultimate Collection in 2004. So I'd heard it before I had a physical copy of it. But really nice. This is the Japanese 3-inch single, I think. So this was like a type of a fan club release, and it's a beautiful track. And initially, this track was to be part of the Dangerous album. This, and I believe Blood on the Dance Floor, two really, really strong tracks. But one was omitted for Will You Be There, I think. And I don't know if this was replaced with Heal the World. I don't think it was replaced with Heal the World. But I would imagine if Heal the World hadn't been on the Dangerous album, this may have been the centerpiece, because it's a beautiful sort of new Jack R&B ballad, and the production on it, as the production on all of Michael's albums in his lifetime, is phenomenal. The production is absolutely beautiful on it, and I love the artwork on this single as well, and that's the artwork that they used for the tour. So in many of the European concerts, when Michael was on tour on his Dangerous tour, next to either side of the stage, the backdrops had this on it on some of those concerts, and I absolutely love what they've done there with the artwork. So beautiful. It just sort of reinforces the imagery and the artwork of the Dangerous era. And before we continue with the singles as well, I'll just sort of have a look at the LP itself. Now, I don't actually remember where or how I acquired this on vinyl. I really don't know. I don't know if it was Smelly's record shop. It wouldn't have been brand new because I'm not a big buyer of new albums, and back in those days as well, I wouldn't have had a whole lot of money. So this was certainly secondhand. I don't know if it was gifted to me by one of my friends from the dance company I was in back then. But I mean, the artwork just is phenomenal. It's beautiful. And I would just spend hours and hours listening to this album and looking into this artwork in absolute amazement. It's astonishing. It's an incredible visual piece of work. And just the back of it here is a sort of a close up on a section of the main picture, I guess. But I mean, you could look at that and sort of delve into that and get an idea of Michael Jackson's sort of psyche and personality. There's a lot of subliminal stuff in there. And I mean, receiving that album, although I received it on cassette tape on Christmas Day, I just stared at the cassette cover in amazement. And because prior to this, Michael's albums, Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad, they're basically shots of Michael, very plain covers, although iconic, and I absolutely love them. But this just took things to a whole other level. And then we got the inlays are just so it's double vinyl. It's not a gatefold vinyl, but it's just a double vinyl like that. And I don't usually do this, but let's just take it out again and just have a look. Okay, so this is side, right? We go side 3 and side 4. Side 3 and side 4. And this is actually in really good shape as well. I haven't listened to this in years on vinyl. I haven't listened to it in years on vinyl. And a lot of people, when discussing the Dangerous album, they sort of say that it's front loaded with these new Jack Swing tracks. And although that is accurate, and the second half of the album is sort of the rock and more guitar orientated music, as a double album, it works incredibly well. Now, I don't know if the track sequencing was sort of designed for the vinyl format, but as a double vinyl, so side one of the first vinyl is Jam, Why You Wanna Trip on Me, and In the Closet. And as a trio of tracks, that works really well. And then side 2 is She Drives Me Wild, Remember the Time, Can't Let Her Get Away, and Heal the World. So you'll notice there that on side 1 you have Jam and In the Closet with an album track, Why You Wanna Trip on Me, in the middle. So you've got 2 singles on side 1. And then on side 2, you've got an album track, She Drives Me Wild, a single, Remember the Time, one of his best singles of all time, Can't Let Her Get Away, another of the album's new Jack Swing album tracks, and then Heal the World. So you've got 2 singles on side 2, 2 singles on side 1, 2 singles on side 2. And then on side 3, it opens with Black or White, one of Michael's greatest pop singles, Who Is It, and Give In to Me. And then so that's a side of 3 singles. And then side 4 is Will You Be There, Keep the Faith, Gone Too Soon, and Dangerous. So you've got 2 singles again on that. So the album, as a vinyl, just really works well with the way the tracks are sequenced. It just as a 2-piece, as a 2 album set, it works really, really well. So that's the vinyl, and I'm really, really happy to have it on vinyl because it's a real thing of beauty. So then in July of 92, Michael released the next single from the album, and that was Jam. Now, Jam is a wonderful track, and my resounding memory of hearing Jam for the first time was on Christmas Day when I put the cassette into my parents' hi-fi. The volume had been turned right up from my folks who were listening to music the previous night, and the intro to Jam features shattering glass, and when I heard that glass shatter, it scared the life out of me. And it's a memory that has lived with me, and it's sort of cemented my memory of Jam. And I always sort of associate hearing that shattering glass with that memory. So that's quite interesting. The single, I think it fared okay. It's the music video is quite fun, or the short film, I should say. It featured a hip hop group of two young dudes at the time called Crisscross. They were absolutely massive for a few years, and their big single was Jump, and I think the album. I want to say it was called Crisscrossed. I don't think it was called Crisscrossed, but something along those lines. I can't remember. But yeah, they were massive, and it was really nice to have them feature in this single. There was something about those two that sort of tied in. Again, Michael was great at tying in popular culture to his short films in the early 90s with the Dangerous Era. Like, thinking back on it now, when you think of all of the people who appeared on his in his music videos, although I'm sort of got ahead of myself, thinking back to Remember the Time, the single of Remember the Time, the second single, it featured Eddie Murphy, who was like the biggest comedian, of his generation in that video. And it also featured Magic Johnson, basketball player, and it featured Iman, David Bowie's wife. But Jam featured a rap by a guy called Heavy D, and I don't really know any other Heavy D. I'm not really sort of aware of anything else Heavy D produced apart from Jam. But nice single, nice release, and I suppose what really cemented Jam as a great tune was Michael used it to open his Dangerous Tour concerts, and it's a phenomenal live performance, and it's well worth checking out. It's iconic, and it cemented the song as a fan favorite. Yeah, it's a wonderful track, and again, it's that sort of new jack swing sort of groove to it. There's no bass in Jam, and it gives it this sort of flat, sort of linear sound. But what Michael did do in the 93 leg of the Dangerous Tour then was he added bass, synth bass into the live performance of Jam, and it gives it a bit of a kick. It gives it maybe more of an edge. So that was really interesting to see how he performed it on the 93 leg of the Dangerous World Tour. But that is Jam. So then into July of 92, Michael released Who Is It? Who Is It's a great song. I don't really have a whole lot to say on it. It's a wonderful track. The music video was directed by David Fincher. David Fincher is the guy who directed that famous movie Fight Club, it's become a cult classic, I suppose. And so this is very sort of dark and moody, the music video. And Michael doesn't appear in a lot of the music video. There was a stand in it as well. I think it may have been E. Casanova stood in for Michael on the music video. And from what I've heard was Michael actually, because of his spiritual beliefs, sort of fell out of love with the idea of the music video and just didn't want to appear in it and didn't make himself available. But nonetheless, I like the video. It's very cinematic looking, very sort of noir, if that's the right word, and very moody. And it's a completely different aesthetic to most other Michael Jackson music videos or short films. So it's interesting. I think the performance of the actual singles on the chart was sort of mid. This was a mid release in terms of its chart placing. This would have been probably, I don't know, maybe outside the top 10. I can't recall really. But I mean, I was completely wrapped up in the album and the era anyway. So at this point, I suppose chart placings didn't have a whole lot of meaning for me for a lot of the time. Don't get me wrong, I was absolutely delighted that Black or White, the debut single, and of course Remember the Time were big, massive number one smash hits. And I think as the era went on, and especially then into 93 and controversy broke and the allegations, the second half of the campaign began to sort of fizzle out a little bit, I think, and then all of the sort of media's attention was more on Michael Jackson's private life than the Dangerous campaign, which was quite sad. So the next single from the Dangerous album was Heal the World. Michael Jackson's Heal the World Foundation was the prime motivation really for Michael to go out on the road with his Dangerous World Tour and to raise loads of money. And on that tour again, of course, Michael visited hospitals and orphanages and all of the usual places. And this is a really nice track, really beautiful vocal performance from Michael. There's a key change, which Michael was famous for. And you don't really get key changes in tracks anymore. But this track was phenomenal, beautifully produced, wonderful vocal performance. Michael isn't in the video, so I guess it's the same sort of aesthetic almost as Man in the Mirror from the Bad album. But this is beautiful. And actually, the globe on the cover here was a big theme from the Dangerous era. So in the opening of the Jam short film, you have when the glass shatters, you've got the globe, the bouncing globe. You've got the globe in the black or white single with the two children sat on top of the globe. And then on the Dangerous tour as well, you had the dancer perform that ballet piece with the globe, and then she would roll that along the stage, and Michael would pick it up and hand it to her, and then he would perform "Heal the World," and then of course the big globe would come on the stage. So the globe was a huge part of the visual sort of aesthetic in almost a subliminal way from the Dangerous era. I actually learned a lot about the album reading this book from Susan Fast. This is from the 33 and a Third series. And this is a book by Susan Fast on the Dangerous album. And I highly recommend this book. It's a really wonderful, eye-opening, deep piece of work. I mean, it looks quite slim, but it's incredibly dense, and there's a load of information and food for thought there. I don't agree with everything Susan Fast says in her book. A lot of it is subjective, obviously. A lot of it is down to personal sort of personal objectivity and how you sort of view things. But Susan Fast makes a great case for this being Michael Jackson's blackest album, and I don't know. Maybe history could be. It could be argued that history is equally culturally his blackest album. But this is a wonderful book, and I highly recommend it. As I say, I didn't agree with everything, but I think it was a wonderful read. So that was Susan Fast's book. So then the next single from the album in February 1993 was "Given to Me." And Michael debuted this short film on the Oprah Winfrey Show in 1993 when he sat down to do his interview with Oprah Winfrey. And the video features Slash, and it's a sort of a live setting. It's Michael performing in a live concert. This, I believe, was filmed in Munich when Michael was on the Dangerous World Tour. So that would have been the first concert. So this was shot way ahead of time. If I'm correct on that, I may be wrong. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. But this is it's a really great track. And again, the single at the time would have been a sort of a mid performance. I suppose really at this point, Michael had been on tour. His Super Bowl performance was coming up, and Michael's album was sort of, people were buying the album as well as some of the singles. But really nice. But what Michael also did at that time was he performed an a cappella intro to "Who Is It?" and sort of ended up almost sabotaging this release because he regenerated interest in "Who Is It?" And then soon after that, "Who Is It?" was re-released on maxi single, actually featuring the Oprah Winfrey a cappella performance as part of the intro. So this sort of re-entered the charts somewhere, and this sort of ended up being a mid entry somewhere in the charts. Great track, one of my favorites from the album, and really love it. But yeah, it's just interesting how this maxi single came about and almost sabotaging this. And this as well was around the time of the Super Bowl. So a few weeks, I believe, after the Oprah interview, Michael performed at the Super Bowl. And again, a central theme, getting back to what I spoke to earlier, was the globe in the center of the stage. So soon after the Super Bowl performance, then these allegations sort of went public. The end of the era sort of tethered out. And I mean, this is a beautiful song. And this also featured on the soundtrack to the Free Willy film. And the Free Willy soundtrack was released on Michael Jackson's MJJ Productions label. So this is a beautiful track, and the lyrics, of course, then became quite prophetic in it because of what Michael was going through in his personal life. So it ended up becoming quite sad, and Michael had to then cancel the rest of his world tour. I believe he was down in South America, and he went to the Priory down in London to receive treatment for painkiller dependency, which was quite sad. And whilst all of that was going on and all of the attention was then focused on Michael, the last and final single from the era was "Gone Too Soon," was released on the 1st of December 1993 as part of World AIDS Day. And the reason it was released on World AIDS Day was because the performance, the music video, it was a tribute to Michael's friend Ryan White, who had passed away from AIDS. He was an AIDS victim. He'd contracted AIDS through a blood transfusion. He was a hemophiliac. I'm not quite sure how to say the word, but so that was really sad. And this didn't do all too good in the charts. I mean, attention was completely removed from the Dangerous campaign at that point, which was quite sad and disappointing. But we'd had 2 years of an incredible era with short films, tour, interviews, Super Bowl. And at the end of all of that, then, towards Christmas 1993, this was released. So this is Dangerous, the short films on VHS. And I specifically remember receiving this for Christmas, and I just could not wait for Christmas Day to open this and put it in my VHS player and to watch all of the short films. And it's beautiful. It features a lot of candid behind the scenes footage of Michael making the videos, specifically black or white, and Remember the Time. And there's some really funny moments in it. There's highlights as well from the Super Bowl performance, although it doesn't. It should really contain the Super Bowl in its entirety. It doesn't actually show everything from it. I think mainly it focuses on the Heal the World performance. Again, the globe being sort of one of the central themes for the album. But this was huge, being able to receive this 2 years later from getting this for Christmas Day of 91 and then getting this for Christmas Day of 93 and having everything that happened in between those 2 years was phenomenal. And it was just magical times. And it's why I continuously, I suppose, return to physical media, because there's something just so vivid tied into the nostalgia and to my memories from these eras that I just highly recommend people to go and start a physical collection. I know there's an argument to be made that you don't need all of this stuff and it's all available online, but it hits different. Something about physical media, especially with Michael, just hit different. And they were just incredible times. Just to be able to receive that. The label there actually is a little bit warped, but I mean, considering that this is well over 30 years old, I suppose there's no surprise. And then the inlay is just sort of a menu of everything contained within. So that's that. And I have the album as well on special editions somewhere. So let me just go get that. So then something I forgot to mention was that when I met my wife in 2008 and got together with my wife had this. So this is the pop-up special edition of the Dangerous album. And there you go. So this was released initially for a very limited run. And this is a gold disc version. And you can also then, I think they reissued it later on briefly on silver disc. So, absolutely beautiful. And this is the reason I married my wife, just for the pop-up Dangerous album. I kid, of course, but it was really nice to get together with a fellow Michael fan and to just get to sort of engage with and see so much of this physical media that I didn't have. And that is absolutely beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And you can pick these up for less than $50 now on eBay as well. So if you don't have that and you like the Dangerous album, I really recommend it. It's a beautiful piece to have in anyone's collection. And I absolutely love it. And then in 2001, of course, they would release Michael's first 4 albums on special edition. And these were released 2 weeks before the Invincible album as part of a wider promotional campaign to, I guess, remind the world of Michael's genius, really. So these were beautiful when these came out. And I was really excited to buy all 4 of these in 2001. So I'll just open it up. So the inside of that special edition book, then the outside cover obviously is just the album art. But then inside it, you had much of what was represented in the original release of the album. You're still getting Planet Earth and the dance, but then you're getting additional images of Michael from the short films from the era. So just really nice. You're getting a nice live shot of Michael performing working day and night on the Dangerous tour. And of course, as well, you're getting all the lyrics on this as well to the tracks, which is really wonderful. Wonderful to finally have all of the lyrics, if we can see that. And there's a beautiful candid shot there of Michael and some of the performers from the black or white short film. And that was a real fun shoot with John Landis. John Landis, who directed Thriller, came back to direct Michael's debut single from the Dangerous album, from Black or White. So just really nice. Michael had a lot of fun on that shoot with John Landis. So yeah, so it's nice, beautiful shot there of Michael wearing his costume from the Panther dance section of the Black or White short film, which ended up becoming almost something political. And we've got a wonderful shot here of Michael and Eddie Murphy with Iman, David Bowie's wife, who both appeared with Michael in the Remember the Time short film, which is one of Michael's best, actually. So that was that. So then in 2005, this was released, and this is the Dangerous Concert live in Bucharest. Now, I initially watched that from the BBC, and I much prefer the BBC broadcast version because it's not edited and it captures the performance in a much more authentic way, I think. And I recorded that on my VHS, so that's back in Ireland somewhere. But this is the HBO broadcast version, and it's nice, although I don't like a lot of the crowd shots. I think they're very jarring, very abrupt, and it's over edited in that sense. But really nice to have it. I guess it was also on the Ultimate Collection in 2004, but nice to have a standalone version of the concert. I think personally, if it was me, I would have gone for the cover art, I would have gone with Michael wearing his aviator shades and his jam jacket, stood with the pyro falling behind him, looking iconic, stood statuesque. I think it would have made for a much more eye-catching, much better sleeve for the DVD. But it's nice, Michael performing Black or White there. So that's it, guys. That's a look at the Dangerous album and the singles. And it's just really nice to sort of look back at this sort of physical product and to just go down memory lane and just to sort of reminisce and look at that. So thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you like the video, please subscribe to the channel. I do hope to make more videos. It's quite difficult with work and being quite busy with life, but I do hope to make some more videos. And thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you in my next video.